The Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the port of Miami as Commander Sarah Mitchell, though no one called her that anymore, stood at the cruise terminal with her rolling suitcase, watching families stream past her toward the gleaming hull of the Caribbean Dream. Children squealed with excitement, dragging oversized floaties. Couples held hands, phones already out to capture their first vacation photos. Everyone looked so beautifully, blissfully ordinary. Sarah adjusted her sunglasses and pulled her baseball cap lower over her auburn hair. She'd chosen the most generic outfit she could find. Khaki shorts, a plain white tank top, canvas sneakers worn soft from years in her closet. Nothing about her screamed military. Nothing suggested that 18 months ago, she'd been coordinating Black Ops communications from a carrier strike group in the South China Sea, or that her call sign, Phantom, had once made admirals stop mid-sentence to listen when she spoke on encrypted channels. "Mom, are you coming or what?" Her daughter's voice cut through her thoughts. Emily, 16 and perpetually impatient, stood 20 feet ahead with her father, Sarah's ex-husband David. At 14, their son Marcus was already boarding, his attention buried in his phone. "Right behind you, sweetheart," Sarah called, forcing brightness into her voice that she didn't quite feel. This cruise had been David's idea, suggested during one of their awkward post-divorce coffee meetings where they discussed custody schedules and who would pay for Marcus's orthodontist appointments. "The kids miss you," he'd said, stirring his latte with unnecessary focus. "I know you've been through hell, Sarah. I know you can't talk about most of it, but they need their mom back. Not the commanding officer. Just Mom." She'd agreed because he was right. 2 decades in Naval Intelligence had cost her more than she'd ever imagined when she'd enlisted at 22. Fresh out of MIT with a degree in cryptographic systems and stars in her eyes. It had cost her her marriage. It had cost her countless birthdays, school plays, parent-teacher conferences. It had cost her the ability to sleep through the night without jerking awake at phantom sounds that might be incoming threats. The doctors at Walter Reed had called it operational stress. Her last commanding officer had called it taking fire in your own head. Sarah just called it the price of doing what needed to be done. But that chapter was supposed to be closed now. Medical retirement at 43, full pension, enough commendations locked in a safe deposit box to wallpaper a small room. She was done. She was civilian. She was supposed to be healing. The ship was enormous, a floating city of 13 decks painted in cheerful blues and whites, with water slides spiraling down its stern and a name emblazoned in letters 10 feet tall. Sarah had deliberately chosen a cruise, something utterly removed from anything military. No uniforms, no protocols, no radios crackling with urgent traffic in the middle of the night. Just poolside drinks with little umbrellas, mediocre buffet food, and forced family bonding. Their cabin was on deck 8, starboard side, with a narrow balcony overlooking the ocean. David had sprung for the upgrade, probably out of guilt. The room was generic cruise ship beige, with 2 queen beds, a small sitting area, and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. Emily immediately claimed the bed nearest the window. Marcus dumped his backpack and disappeared toward the youth activities deck before Sarah had even unpacked her toiletries. "He'll be fine," David said, reading her expression. "He's 14. This is probably torture for him." "I remember when he thought spending time with us was fun," Sarah murmured, unzipping her suitcase with more force than necessary. "Yeah, well, that was before you missed 18 months of his life." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and familiar. David had the decency to look immediately apologetic, but Sarah just nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here." That first evening, they did all the obligatory cruise activities. The muster drill, where everyone donned bulky orange life vests and pretended to pay attention to safety procedures. Dinner in the main dining room, an overwhelming affair with waiters who introduced themselves with choreographed enthusiasm and menus offering 17 different appetizers. Emily documented everything on her phone. Marcus picked at his food and asked when he could go to the arcade. David made awkward small talk about the weather and the ship's amenities. Sarah smiled and nodded and felt like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. How did people do this? How did they simply relax? Later, Standing on their cabin balcony while David and the kids watched the evening entertainment show, Sarah stared out at the dark Atlantic. The ship had departed Miami just after sunset, and now there was nothing but water in every direction, black and endless. The wake glowed white with bioluminescence. The stars overhead were brilliant, undimmed by city lights. For the first time in months, she felt something loosen in her chest. Out here, the world was simple. Water, sky, the steady thrum of the ship's engines. No encrypted channels. No tactical displays. No decisions that might cost lives. She could do this. She could be normal. She could be a mom who went on cruises and complained about the air conditioning and took too many photos of sunset. She almost believed it. The second day passed in a blur of sunshine and chlorine. They hit the water slides, all except Sarah, who claimed she wanted to read by the pool, but actually spent the time scanning faces, old habits dying hard. Emily made friends with a group of girls from Texas. Marcus found kids his age in the arcade. David fell asleep in a deck chair, his nose immediately starting to burn despite the sunscreen Sarah had reminded him to apply. Sarah wandered the ship, trying to settle into the rhythm of vacation. She attended a towel-folding demonstration. She walked the promenade deck, counting her steps. She stood at the stern and watched other ships pass in the distance, cargo vessels and container ships going about their business, and felt nothing. That night at dinner, Emily was animated, talking about a boy named Trevor from Michigan who was actually pretty cool for someone from the Midwest. Marcus remained monosyllabic, but seemed less miserable. David ordered wine and reminisced about their honeymoon. Also a cruise, 20 years ago, to Alaska. "Remember when we saw the whales?" he asked Sarah, his eyes slightly unfocused from the Cabernet. "You cried." "I did not cry," Sarah protested automatically, but she was smiling. "My eyes were watering from the cold." "You absolutely cried. You said it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen." She had. And it had been. That was before Kabul, before Yemen, before the deployment, where she coordinated an extraction that saved 14 lives but cost 6 others, and she'd had to listen to the whole thing play out on encrypted radio while sitting in a communications room 12,000 miles away, unable to do anything but her job. That night, Sarah dreamed of whales, and then of fire, and then of static-filled voices calling for help in languages she couldn't speak. She woke at 0400. 0400, her mind still insisted. Soaked in sweat, her heart hammering. On the other bed, David snored softly. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the television Emily had left on mute. Sarah slipped out onto the balcony. The air was warm and thick with salt. The ship plowed through gentle swells, its stabilizers keeping the ride smooth. Somewhere below, she could hear the faint thump of music from one of the late-night venues. She gripped the railing and practiced the breathing exercises a VA therapist had taught her. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 6 counts out, repeat. It mostly worked. By dawn, she was standing at the forward observation deck with a terrible coffee from the 24-hour buffet, watching the sun rise over the Atlantic. The horizon was perfectly flat, a line dividing blue from gold. A few early risers jogged past on the track. A cruise employee mopped the deck with industrial efficiency. And in the distance, just visible through the morning haze, Sarah spotted something that made her stomach tighten instinctively. A ship. Not a cruise ship or cargo vessel, but something low and gray and purpose-built. Military. She shouldn't have been able to identify it at this distance with the naked eye. But 20 years of training didn't just disappear. The profile was distinctive, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, probably on patrol or transit between bases. As she watched, it adjusted course slightly, running parallel to the cruise ship at what looked like about 5 miles distance. Routine, she told herself. The Navy operated all over these waters. It meant nothing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that had kept her alive through 2 decades of intelligence work, the feeling that something was about to change. The third day of the cruise dawned with a sky so clear it almost hurt to look at. Sarah had managed 4 hours of sleep after returning to the cabin at dawn, enough to function, but not enough to feel rested. David was already up, organizing a shore excursion for their port day in Nassau. Emily was debating between jet skiing and parasailing. Marcus wanted to find an internet cafe to game with his friends back home. "What about you, Sarah?" David asked, studying a colorful brochure. "Beach? Snorkeling? There's a historical tour of the old forts if you want something more educational." "I might just stay on the ship," she said, pouring coffee from the in-room maker that produced something barely qualified as coffee. "Let you guys have fun." Emily looked up from her phone, concern flickering across her features. "Mom, you have to come. That's the whole point of this." "Sweetheart, I'm fine. I'll enjoy the quiet. The ship will be half empty. I can actually relax by the pool." It was a lie, but a convincing one. The truth was that the idea of a crowded Bahamian port, thousands of tourists and unfamiliar faces, and too many variables to track, made her chest tighten. On the ship, at least, she could control her environment. David caught her eye, and she saw he understood. He'd lived with her long enough to recognize the signs. "Okay," he said carefully, "but tomorrow we're all doing the private island together. Non-negotiable. Deal." They left after breakfast, joining the stream of passengers heading to the tender boats that would ferry them to shore. Sarah waved from the promenade deck, watching them go, and felt guilty relief wash over her. The ship was indeed quieter with half its passengers gone. Sarah claimed a deck chair in a relatively isolated spot near the bow, away from the main pool area and its thumping music. She brought a thriller novel she'd picked up in the ship's bookstore, something involving hackers and international conspiracies, which would have been funny if it weren't so painful how wrong the author got the details. She managed 30 pages before her attention drifted. The destroyer she'd spotted that morning was gone, probably continuing its patrol route. Other ships dotted the horizon now. A container vessel, what looked like a research boat, and a sailboat moving with elegant slowness. The ocean was a strange shade of turquoise this close to the Bahamas, nothing like the deep blue of open Atlantic. She could see the bottom in places, coral formations and fish darting through the clear water. A few intrepid cruise passengers had chosen to stay behind and were snorkeling off the small beach area the ship maintained on its lowest deck. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to simply exist in the moment. Sunday salt air, the distant cry of seagulls, normal things, peaceful things. The public address system crackled to life. "Good afternoon, guests of the Caribbean Dream. This is Captain Rodriguez. Just a brief notice that we may experience minor changes to our heading over the next hour due to military operations in the area. This is completely routine and nothing to be concerned about. Please continue to enjoy your day, and those on shore excursions. We'll see you back aboard by 1700 hours. Thank you." Sarah's eyes snapped open. Military operations. That phrasing was deliberately vague, probably just exercises or patrol corridor they needed to avoid. But something about it made the old instincts hum to life. She stood and walked to the railing, scanning the horizon. There, about 3 miles out, maybe less, the destroyer had returned. Or perhaps it was a different one. Hard to tell at this distance, but it was definitely Arleigh Burke class. And it was moving with purpose, not the lazy patrol speed from earlier. Other passengers had noticed too. A man with an expensive camera was taking photos. A group of teenagers were pointing and speculating about what it was. Probably escorting something. One of them said confidently, like a submarine or whatever. Sarah's professional mind, dormant for months, began automatically analyzing what she was seeing. The destroyer's course, its speed, the way it seemed to be establishing a perimeter around something she couldn't yet see. "Stop it," she told herself. "You're on vacation. You're not an intelligence officer anymore. This is not your concern." But her feet carried her up to deck 12 anyway, to the observation area with the best vantage point. A few other passengers were there, watching the military vessel with curiosity. Sarah kept her distance, using the zoom on her phone's camera to get a better look. The destroyer was definitely active. She could see crew moving on deck. Its radar systems were clearly operating. And unless she was imagining things, which was entirely possible, it seemed to be moving on an intercept course with the cruise ship. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "This place is amazing. We went to this beach bar, and Dad is trying to dance to reggae. It's horrifying, but also hilarious. Wish you were here. Sarah smiled despite herself and typed back, take videos for blackmail purposes. Have fun, sweetie. She was about to pocket the phone when she heard it. Faint but unmistakable. A radio transmission. Bleeding through on some frequency it shouldn't be audible on. The ship's communication system must have had some kind of interference or malfunction, because for just a moment, she heard a voice. Caribbean Dream. This is USS Fitzgerald. Be advised we're conducting verification protocols in your vicinity. The transmission cut off as quickly as it had appeared, probably someone realizing they broadcast on an open channel by mistake. But Sarah's blood had gone cold. Verification protocols. That wasn't standard language for routine exercises. That was language used when something needed to be confirmed. Checked. Investigated. She looked down at the main pool deck, where the remaining passengers were oblivious, sipping fruity drinks and playing pool games. Then back at the destroyer, which was definitely closer now. Sarah's hand went to her hip, reaching for a radio that wasn't there anymore, hadn't been there for 18 months. She forced herself to breathe. This was nothing. Routine. The Navy probably ran these kind of checks on cruise ships all the time, especially post 9/11. It meant nothing. Except verification protocols weren't for ships. They were for people. The loudspeaker crackled again, and this time it was a different voice, younger, uncertain. Attention guests, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our communication systems. Nothing to worry about. Our engineers are on it. If you experience any unusual sounds or interference on your devices, please disregard. Thank you for your patience. Sarah's mind raced. Communications interference. A destroyer running verification protocols. Her fingers moved almost automatically, pulling up the cruise ship's information from the daily newsletter she'd received that morning. The Caribbean Dream was equipped with standard maritime communications, VHF radio, satellite systems, emergency beacons. Nothing sophisticated, but all ships were required to broadcast identification transponders. And if someone had accessed those systems, even accidentally, they might have seen something they weren't supposed to. Something buried in passenger manifest data. Something like a retired Naval Intelligence officer's service records, which were supposed to be secured, but which any competent signal specialist could find if they knew where to look. Something like a call sign. Sarah's hands were shaking. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful. She'd use her married name, Mitchell, not her service name. She listed herself as consultant on all the cruise paperwork. There was no reason anyone should connect her to her past. Unless there was a leak in the system. Unless some routine database check had flagged her presence. Unless that momentary radio transmission had included information that made some lieutenant on the Fitzgerald stop and say, "Wait, run that name again." She needed to think. She needed to. The destroyer was close now. Close enough that she could make out individual crew members on deck. And as she watched, something happened that confirmed her worst fears. The ship was turning. Smoothly, deliberately, bringing itself parallel to the cruise ship, and figures in uniform were assembling on deck, not in alarm formation, but in something worse. Something that looked like a formal honor guard. Sarah's phone rang. The display showed unknown number. Her thumb hovered over the decline button. But 20 years of training, of answering calls at all hours, of being ready when duty called, it was burned too deep. She answered. Commander Mitchell? The voice was male, professional, with a slight southern accent. This is Lieutenant Commander James Peterson, USS Fitzgerald. Ma'am, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Are you somewhere you can speak privately? Sarah's voice came out steady despite the chaos in her head. Commander Peterson, I'm retired. Medical separation. I don't have clearance anymore, and I don't have authorization to. Ma'am, I understand, but we've just received flash traffic from NAVSOC that references your call sign in relation to a developing situation. Your presence on this vessel has been flagged, and we've been ordered to establish contact and verify your status. Her call sign. Phantom. Sarah closed her eyes. That call sign was retired when I was. Whatever situation you're dealing with, I can't help you. Ma'am, with respect, that decision isn't mine to make. Or yours. A pause. Admiral Chin sends her regards and says, and I quote, "Tell Phantom that some ghosts don't get to retire when there's still unfinished business." Admiral Patricia Chun, Sarah's last commanding officer, the woman who'd signed her medical separation papers with visible reluctance, who'd told Sarah at her retirement ceremony that she'd be called back if the world went to hell. Sarah looked out at the destroyer, now matching their speed perfectly about 200 yards off the starboard side. She could see the honor guard clearly now, officers standing at attention. "What unfinished business?" she asked quietly. "That's classified, ma'am. But I'm authorized to tell you that we need your eyes on something. Just your eyes, just your assessment. No one is asking you to come back fully. But there's a situation developing, and you're the only person in this theater with the specific knowledge to evaluate it. I have 2 children on shore in Nassau right now. I have an ex-husband. I have a life I'm trying to rebuild. I know, ma'am. We've already arranged for their safe return to the ship, and this won't take long. A few hours at most." Another pause. "Ma'am, I wouldn't be making this call if it wasn't critical." Sarah felt the last 18 months, the therapy sessions of medication, the careful reconstruction of something resembling a normal life, threatening to crack apart. She'd sworn she was done. She'd promised herself no more. But Admiral Chun didn't make empty threats. If she'd sent a destroyer to track down a retired officer on a cruise ship, the situation was worse than critical. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked, hating herself even as the words left her mouth. "Stand by, ma'am. We're arranging a transfer." "And Commander Mitchell?" Peterson's voice softened slightly. "Welcome back to the world, Phantom." The line went dead. Sarah stood at the railing, watching the destroyer and feeling the familiar weight settle back onto her shoulders. 1,700 passengers on this ship were about to witness something they wouldn't understand. Her carefully maintained anonymity was about to shatter. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of ocean and sky and classified darkness, something was happening that needed the ghost they called Phantom. She just hoped she still remembered how to be her. The next 40 minutes passed in a strange blur of efficiency and surreality. Sarah had retreated to her cabin, moving on autopilot, pulling her cruise-casual persona apart and trying to find something underneath that felt like Commander Sarah Mitchell. She changed into dark jeans and a black long-sleeve shirt, the closest thing to operational dress she'd packed. She pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail. She found herself checking her reflection in the bathroom mirror and seeing a stranger who looked both familiar and wrong. Her phone buzzed continuously. First Emily. "Mom, they're pulling everyone from shore early. Some kind of drill or something. We have to get back to the ship in an hour. So annoying." Then David. "Sarah, call me. Something weird is happening. The tour guides are all acting strange." She texted back to both. "Everything's fine. They probably just need to adjust the schedule. See you soon." Another call from the unknown number. Peterson again. "Commander, we're bringing the boat alongside in approximately 15 minutes. We'll be using the crew access point on Deck 3, aft section. The ship's captain has been briefed and has agreed to cooperate fully. How many people know what's happening?" Sarah asked. "On the cruise ship? Captain Rodriguez and his chief security officer. On my vessel? Need to know only. We're keeping this as contained as possible. The passengers are going to notice a military boarding operation. Commander, we're calling it a routine safety inspection due to the communications malfunction. As far as anyone knows, we're just verifying their equipment after they reported technical issues." Clever. Use the cover they'd already established. "And after I'm aboard your vessel? We've established a secure communications link to NavSoc. You'll be briefed in full. We estimate 2 hours maximum for the assessment we need. Then we'll return you to the cruise ship before most passengers are even aware you were gone." 2 hours. She'd given up 2 decades for 2 hours. Sarah grabbed her phone and a small bag containing her passport and other documents, old habits about being ready to move on short notice, and made her way down to Deck 3. The corridors were mostly empty, passengers either still in port or up on the main decks. A few crew members passed her, giving her curious looks but saying nothing. The aft crew access point was a utilitarian space, all metal in function, where the ship took on supplies and equipment. Captain Rodriguez was there himself, a stocky man in his 60s with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime at sea. Next to him stood a younger man in the ship's security uniform, looking distinctly nervous. "Ms. Mitchell," Rodriguez said carefully, his accent carrying traces of his Cuban heritage. "I've been informed this is a matter of national security. I'm sorry for the disruption, Captain. I didn't expect this any more than you did." He studied her for a long moment. "I've been sailing these waters for 40 years. I know the difference between a routine inspection and something else." He gestured toward the access door, where they could already hear the approach of a smaller vessel. "Whatever you're about to do, be safe. And come back to my ship. I don't want to explain to your family why you disappeared." "That's my plan, sir." The transfer itself was remarkably quick and professional. The Fitzgerald had sent a rigid-hull inflatable boat with 4 crew members, all business. Sarah descended the access ladder, grateful she'd stayed in decent shape despite the months of retirement, and within moments was seated in the boat, a life vest fastened around her, speeding toward the gray hull of the destroyer. The scale of the vessel hit her as they approached. She'd been aboard destroyers before dozens of times, but always as Commander Mitchell, always with a purpose and a mission. Now she was just a civilian consultant being ferried to meet a crisis she didn't understand. They came alongside a boarding platform. Hands reached down to help her up. The deck was non-skid under her feet, familiar and foreign at once. And there, waiting at the top of the gangway, was Lieutenant Commander Peterson himself, tall, maybe 35, with a lean build, a runner, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Commander Mitchell," he said, saluting crisply. Sarah returned the salute automatically before remembering she didn't have to anymore. "You can call me Sarah. I'm not active duty. With respect, ma'am, for the next 2 hours, you are Admiral's orders." He gestured toward the superstructure. "If you'll follow me, we've set up in CIC, the Combat Information Center, heart of any warship, where all the sensor data and tactical information flowed." Sarah followed Peterson through the ship, noting details she couldn't help but observe. The crew was at a higher alert status than normal peacetime operations. Weapon stations were manned. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. They entered CIC, and it was like stepping back in time. The darkened space was filled with the glow of tactical displays and the quiet murmur of specialists at their stations. The smell of electronics and recycled air. The slight vibration of the ship's systems running at full power. Sarah's heart rate, which had been elevated since Peterson's first call, somehow steadied. This space, she understood. A large display dominated one wall, showing tactical plot of the region. The Caribbean Dream was marked in blue, the Fitzgerald in green, and scattered across the display were other contacts, ships and aircraft, all tagged with identification codes. Peterson led her to a secure terminal setup in a small briefing space adjoining CIC. "Before we go further, ma'am, I need to verify your identity and have you sign some paperwork. You're being brought back under a temporary activation clause in your retirement agreement. It gives you limited clearance for this specific situation only." Sarah scanned the documents he handed her. It was all legal, all by the book. With her signature, she'd be back in the system, at least temporarily. She thought about Emily and Marcus and David, probably just boarding the tender boats back to the cruise ship, completely unaware their mother was about to step back into the world she'd tried so hard to leave. She signed. "Okay," Peterson said, his posture relaxing slightly. "Now I can actually tell you what's happening." He pulled up a chair, and Sarah sat across from him. 3 days ago, NAVSOC detected an unusual pattern in electronic communications traffic in this region. Someone is using an old frequency hopping protocol that hasn't been in active use for almost 15 years. It's very sophisticated, very difficult to detect unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Sarah's mind was already working. Frequency hopping was phased out when we moved to spread spectrum encryption. The only people who would still use it are someone who wanted to hide in the noise of old protocols. Exactly Someone who assumed we weren't monitoring those frequencies anymore. Peterson pulled up a spectrographic display on one of the monitors. But we are, as part of a broader signals intelligence sweep. And when our analysts saw this pattern, they flagged it immediately. Sarah studied the display. Even after 18 months away, she could read the data. The frequency hops were irregular but patterned, cycling through a specific range. That's not random. That's coded communication. Correct. And here's where it gets interesting and where you come in. Peterson pulled up another display, this one showing decoded fragments of text. Our cryptanalysts have been working on this for 72 hours. They managed to break about 30% of the traffic. And in that 30%, they found references to something called Operation Phantom Protocol. The name hit Sarah like cold water. She stared at the display, her mind racing back 15 years of operations she'd been part of, plans she'd helped develop, systems she'd implemented. That's impossible. Phantom Protocol was dismantled. Every part of it was supposed to be scrubbed from the system. That's what we thought too, which is why Admiral Chin specifically requested you. You were one of the architects of Phantom Protocol, and one of the few people who knew the full scope of it. Peterson's expression was grim. We need to know if what we're seeing is someone using fragment of the old protocol, or if somehow, impossibly, the full system is still active. Sarah's hands had gone cold. Phantom Protocol had been her brainchild, developed during the height of anti-terrorism operations in the mid-2000s. It was a backup communication system designed to operate completely off-grid, using hijacked civilian infrastructure and old military frequencies that had supposedly been decommissioned. The idea was to create a network that could function even if every official communication channel was compromised. It had been brilliant. It had also been dangerous as hell, which was why it had been shut down and classified at a level most people didn't even know existed. If someone has reconstructed Phantom Protocol, Sarah said slowly, they have access to a communication network that we can't easily trace, that can piggyback on civilian systems without detection, and that can coordinate operations across huge distances without triggering normal monitoring. She looked at Peterson. You're telling me someone is actively using this in the Caribbean? We think so, and we think they've been using it to coordinate something big. We've detected increased traffic over the past week, all using the protocol. But we can't decrypt the full content without understanding the underlying architecture. He pulled up more displays showing intercept locations, signal strengths, transmission times. This is where your cruise ship comes in, Commander. About 6 hours ago, one of the signals bounced off the Caribbean Dreams communication array. Just for a moment, but long enough for us to get a partial track. And that's when our system ran an automatic check of everyone aboard the ship, looking for anyone with relevant clearance or background. And it found my name. It found your service record. It found your call sign. And it triggered an automatic alert that went straight to NAVSOC. Peterson leaned forward. Commander, Admiral Chin believes someone deliberately routed that signal through your cruise ship. She thinks whoever is using Phantom Protocol knows you're aboard and they're sending a message. Sarah's mind was reeling. That's insane. No one knows I'm here. I didn't even decide to take this cruise until 2 weeks ago. Your passport was flagged when you boarded. It's standard procedure for anyone with your level of clearance, even retired. Someone with access to the right databases would have known the moment you stepped on that ship. But who and why? That's what we need you to help us figure out. Peterson stood and gestured toward the main CIC display. We've been tracking the signal sources. Most are coming from shore stations. We think they're using old radio equipment, probably abandoned facilities or repurposed civilian infrastructure. But there's one source we can't pin down. It's mobile and it's close. We think it might be another vessel in this area. Sarah stood and walked to the main display, studying the pattern of intercepts and signal locations. Her old skills were coming back, the ability to see patterns in chaos, to understand the logic behind communication networks. You said the traffic has increased in the past week. Show me the temporal distribution. One of the CIC specialists, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25, pulled up the data. Sarah studied it, looking for patterns. Transmission times, durations, frequencies. And there Buried in the data, she saw it. They're coordinating a window, she said quietly. Whatever they're planning, it has a specific time frame. These bursts of traffic aren't random. They're synchronization signals, making sure everyone is ready for a specific moment. When? Peterson asked. Sarah did quick mental calculations, looking at the pattern of escalation. Based on this progression, less than 24 hours. Maybe as little as 12. The room went very quiet. Peterson exchanged glances with the Fitzgerald's captain, who joined them in Sicey, a woman in her 50s with commander's insignia and an expression of controlled concern. Commander Mitchell, the captain said, I'm Captain Jessica Ramirez. If your assessment is correct, we need to know what we're facing. What could someone do with a fully functional Phantom Protocol network? Sarah turned to face them. If they reconstructed it completely, they could coordinate a multi-point operation across hundreds or thousands of miles with virtually no warning. They could infiltrate systems. They could spoof communications. They could make it look like official traffic when it's not, or hide hostile traffic in plain sight. She paused. In the anti-terrorism framework, we designed it to be used for rapid response to emerging threats. But in the wrong hands, it's a tool for exactly the kind of coordinated attack it was supposed to prevent. What kind of attack? Ramirez asked. That depends on who's using it and what their objective is. But given that they're operating in the Caribbean, near major shipping lanes, near U.S. territories. Sarah pulled up a map overlay on the display. If I were planning something and I had Phantom Protocol, I'd be looking at high-value targets. Cruise ships, cargo vessels, possibly infrastructure on shore. Something designed to cause maximum disruption and casualties while maintaining coordination across multiple attack points. The implications hung in the air. Peterson spoke first. We need to decrypt more of the traffic. We need to know who's behind this and what exactly they're planning. To do that, you need the encryption keys, Sarah said, which were supposed to have been destroyed 15 years ago when the protocol was shut down. Were they? Sarah met his eyes. I destroyed my copies personally, but there were other key holders. 5 total, if I remember correctly. Any of them could have kept their keys, either as insurance or for exactly this kind of resurrection. Do you remember who they were? 3 of them are dead. 1 is in a federal prison for unrelated charges. The 5th, Sarah's stomach sank. The 5th was a communications specialist named Daniel Rourke. He left the Navy 8 years ago, retired to the Caribbean. Last I heard, he was running a maritime communications business out of the Bahamas. Peterson was already signaling to one of his specialists. Get me everything we have on Daniel Rourke. Current location, business operations, known associates. If it is Rourke, Sarah said, he'd have the technical knowledge to rebuild the protocol. And he'd have motivation. He was always bitter about how the program was shut down. He thought it was a waste of a powerful tool. The specialist called out from her station. Sir, we have a Daniel Rourke flagged as operating a business called Clearwave Marine Communications in Nassau. Current location. A pause. He's listed as providing contract services to several vessels in the area, including one that's currently anchored about 15 miles from our position. Everyone looked at the tactical display. The specialist highlighted a contact they'd been tracking. A mid-sized vessel that had been maintaining position for several hours, officially listed as a charter yacht called the Sea Serpent. That's our mobile signal source, Peterson said quietly. Has to be. Sarah stared at the display, pieces clicking into place. He knew I was on the Caribbean Dream. He routed the signal through the ship's systems deliberately, knowing it would trigger a flag, knowing I'd be brought in. This is a message. What kind of message? Ramirez asked. Either a warning or... Sarah's expression darkened. Or he's challenging me. Phantom Protocol was as much mine as his. Maybe he wants me to know what he's doing with it. Maybe this is personal. Peterson was already moving. We need to board that yacht. If Rourke is there, and if he has the operational hub for this network. It won't be that simple, Sarah interrupted. If he's smart, and he is, the moment you approach, he'll trigger fail-safes. The data will be encrypted and scrubbed. You'll find nothing but a communications consultant who happens to have some old equipment. Then what do you suggest? Sarah looked at the display, at the yacht sitting out there in international waters, at the pattern of signals that suggested something terrible was being coordinated. She thought about Emily and Marcus, about David, about the thousands of innocent people on the Caribbean Dream, and probably dozens of other vessels in the region. "I suggest," she said slowly, "that we need someone to make contact with Rourke. Someone he'd believe. Someone he'd want to talk to." The meaning was clear. Peterson shook his head. "Commander, you're not active duty. We can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering." Sarah turned to Captain Ramirez. "You need someone to get aboard that yacht and confirm what's happening. Someone who knows the protocol well enough to recognize the setup and maybe access the system. That's me. That's why you wanted me here." "It's too dangerous," Peterson protested. "We don't know what we're walking into." "Which is exactly why it has to be someone who understands what they're looking at." Sarah's voice was firm, the command tone she'd thought she'd forgotten coming back naturally. "And if Rourke is behind this, he'll want to see me. He'll want to prove he outsmarted the person who helped build what he's now using. That's our way in." Ramirez studied her for a long moment. "If I authorize this, you'll be wearing a wire. You'll have a team standing by. And at the first sign of trouble, we're pulling you out." "Agreed." "And you understand that if this goes wrong, the political fallout of a military operation against a civilian vessel in international waters could be catastrophic?" "I understand, Captain. But the alternative is letting whatever Rourke is planning happen. And based on those signals, that window closes in hours, not days." Peterson pulled up a communications panel. "I need to brief Admiral Chun. She'll have to sign off on this." The secure link took only moments to establish. Admiral Patricia Chen's face appeared on the display, a woman in her 60s, her dark hair now streaked with gray, her expression as sharp as Sarah remembered. "Commander Mitchell," Chen said, and there was something in her voice that might have been warmth or regret or both. "I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." "Ma'am, I understand the situation. I'm requesting permission to make direct contact with the suspected source of the Phantom Protocol operation." Chen didn't look surprised. "I thought you might. Peterson, what's your tactical assessment?" For the next 10 minutes, they reviewed options, risks, protocols. Chen asked questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. In the end, she looked directly at Sarah through the video link. "Commander, I know what I'm asking. I know you got out because the job broke something in you. I know you have a family waiting on that cruise ship who think their mother is on vacation. But I also know that if Phantom Protocol is active, you're one of 3 people alive who might be able to stop it, and the other 2 can't help us." "I know, ma'am." "Then you have authorization." "But Mitchell," Chen's expression softened slightly. "Come back in one piece. And after this is done, you're retired again. For real this time. That's an order." "Yes, ma'am." The link closed. Captain Ramirez immediately began issuing orders, pulling together a boarding team, preparing equipment. Peterson turned to Sarah. "We'll set you up with comms gear, concealed but effective. The story is you've chartered a private boat to visit the Sea Serpent. Maybe you're shopping for communications equipment for a yacht you're considering buying. Something that gets you aboard without raising immediate red flags. Rourke will see through that in about 30 seconds. Probably. But 30 seconds is all we need to confirm visual on the operation and get our team in position." Peterson pulled up a detailed plan on a tablet. "You'll approach in a rental boat we've arranged. You'll be carrying a tracking beacon and an open microphone. Once we confirm hostile intent, the boarding team moves in." Sarah nodded, her mind already running through scenarios, contingencies, the 1,000 variables that could go wrong. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd spent 20 years doing. But she'd also spent 20 years watching people get hurt doing exactly this kind of operation. 40 minutes later, she was on a small rental powerboat approaching the Sea Serpent. The Fitzgerald just visible on the horizon behind her, and Peterson's voice was a quiet presence in her ear through the sophisticated comms gear they fitted. "You're looking good, Phantom. Target vessel is definitely active. We're reading power signatures consistent with major communications equipment. No visible weapons, but stay alert." Sarah brought the boat alongside the yacht swim platform. The Sea Serpent was beautiful, 50 feet of sleek fiberglass and chrome, flying a Bahamian flag. Exactly the kind of vessel a successful communications consultant might own. A figure appeared on the aft deck. Male, late 40s, with sun-bleached hair and the weathered look of someone who spent their life on the water. Even after 8 years, Sarah recognized Daniel Rourke immediately. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, Sarah," he called down. "I was wondering how long it would take them to send you." Sarah killed the rental boat's engine and secured it to the Sea Serpent's swim platform, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Every instinct she developed over 20 years was screaming that this was wrong, that she was walking into something carefully orchestrated. But that was exactly why she was here, to see what Rourke had built and to stop it. "Permission to come aboard?" she called up, keeping her voice neutral. Rourke's smile widened. He looked good, she had to admit, tanned and fit, wearing expensive casual clothes that spoke of success. Nothing about him suggested someone coordinating what might be a major security threat. Of course, though I have to say, the rental boat is a nice touch. You almost look like a legitimate customer instead of a Naval Intelligence commander sent to investigate me. "Retired commander," Sarah said, climbing up to the deck. Behind her, she knew Peterson and the team were listening to every word. "And I'm here because someone activated a protocol that was supposed to be dead and buried. A protocol you helped design. Direct as ever. I always like that about you, Sarah." Rourke gestured toward the yacht's main salon. "Come inside. It's cooler, and we have a lot to talk about." The interior of the Sea Serpent was as impressive as its exterior. Polished teak, leather seating, and state-of-the-art electronics. But what caught Sarah's attention immediately was the communications equipment. Banks of it, far more sophisticated than any legitimate marine business would need. Frequency analyzers, encryption systems, multiple computer terminals running software she recognized from her intelligence days. And there, on the main display, she saw it, the Phantom Protocol interface, as familiar to her as her own reflection. The system she'd helped create, running active, coordinating something across a network that stretched across the Caribbean. "Jesus, Daniel," she said quietly. "What have you done?" Rourke moved a small bar and poured 2 glasses of something amber. "I've done what we should have done 15 years ago. I've made Phantom Protocol operational again. Would you like a drink?" "No." Sarah's eyes were scanning the displays, reading data, trying to understand the scope of what she was seeing. "Why?" The protocol was shut down for good reasons. The potential for abuse was too high. The potential for abuse. Rourke laughed, but there was bitterness in it. "Sarah, we created the most powerful covert communications system in existence. Something that could coordinate operations across the globe without detection. And they shut it down because some politicians got nervous about accountability. They shut it down because it was too dangerous. Because in the wrong hands. In the wrong hands, it's a weapon. But in the right hands, it's a tool. A tool I've been using to build something important." He gestured to the displays. "Come here. Let me show you what I've actually been doing, instead of whatever nightmare scenario your admiral has imagined." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously toward her hip again, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The calm gear in her ear was silent. Peterson was letting her work, trusting her judgment about when to call in the team. She moved closer to the displays, her mind cataloging everything she saw. "I'm tracking 23 active nodes," Rourke said, pulling up a map overlay, all across the Caribbean. "Each one is a communications relay, yes, but they're not coordinating attacks. They're coordinating rescues." "Rescues?" Sarah's voice was flat with disbelief. "Let me ask you something, Commander. How many boats go missing in the Caribbean every year? How many people disappear because they're off the grid? Because their emergency beacons fail? Because no one knows where to look?" Rourke pulled up data on another screen. Hundreds, maybe thousands. And most of them could be saved if there was a network that could track vessels, coordinate search patterns, and mobilize resources quickly. He turned to face her. "That's what I've built. I've taken our old protocol and repurposed it. I've created a network that monitors maritime traffic, identifies vessels in distress, and coordinates rescue operations before official channels even know there's a problem, all using infrastructure that no one pays attention to anymore. Sarah studied the data he was showing her. It was convincing. Transmission logs that looked like rescue coordination, vessel tracking that could be search patterns. But something didn't add up. If this is legitimate, why all the secrecy? Why use Phantom Protocol instead of working through official channels? Because official channels are slow, bureaucratic, and often too late. Because I can't operate a network like this without access to systems I'm not supposed to touch. Rourke's expression hardened. And because the moment I went official, someone would shut me down, just like they shut down Phantom Protocol, just like they shut down every innovative solution, because it doesn't fit their protocols and procedures. Peterson's voice crackled softly in Sarah's ear. "Commander, we're analyzing the data feeds from your position. His story is plausible, but we're seeing encrypted traffic that doesn't match rescue coordination patterns." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Show me the current operations. If you're really doing search and rescue, show me an active case." Rourke hesitated, just for a moment, and in that hesitation, Sarah knew. Whatever truth there was in what he was showing her, there was something else underneath, something he didn't want her to see. "I can show you the logs," he said carefully, "but the active operations are sensitive. People don't always want it known when they're in trouble, especially if they're in these waters for reasons that aren't entirely legal. So you're helping smugglers, drug runners, people who don't want official rescue services because they can't afford the scrutiny." Sarah shook her head. "That's not rescue coordination, Daniel. That's criminal facilitation. I'm saving lives." Rourke's voice rose, genuine emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. "Do you think I care if someone is transporting cargo they shouldn't have? If I can keep them from drowning, if I can keep their families from waiting for news that never comes, then yes, I help them, and I don't apologize for it." There was truth in that anger. Sarah realized, whatever else Rourke was doing, he genuinely believed in this mission. But that didn't explain the encryption patterns Peterson had mentioned, or the synchronized timing of the increased traffic. "Peterson," she said quietly, knowing the microphone would pick it up, "I need more time." Rourke's expression changed. "You're wearing a wire." "Of course you are." He moved to one of the terminals and typed something. "And right about now, your support team is losing signal as my jamming systems kick in. A nice feature of Phantom Protocol. It can isolate itself when necessary." Sarah's hand went to her ear, but she could already tell Rourke was right. The faint background hiss of the open channel was gone. "You're making this worse, Daniel." "Am I?" "From my perspective, I'm protecting my operation from a military intervention that would shut down something that saves lives." He gestured toward the displays again, his demeanor shifting to something more desperate. "Sarah, you of all people should understand. You designed half of the system. You know what it's capable of. Don't let them destroy it again because they're too afraid to see its potential." "I'm not afraid of the potential. I'm afraid of what happens when someone with good intentions uses a system this powerful without oversight. We built Phantom Protocol with safeguards, with accountability. What you've created here has none of that. What I've created is efficient, effective, uncorrupted by politics and budget concerns, and..." A alarm began beeping on one of the terminals. Rourke's face went pale. He moved quickly to the console, typing rapidly. No. What is it?" Sarah moved to look, but he blocked her view. "A distress call. A vessel in trouble, about 8 miles from here. They're taking on water. Engine failure. 5 people aboard, including children." His fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'm coordinating response from the nearest capable vessels." Sarah saw data streams lighting up, the network activating exactly as Rourke had described. Phantom Protocol was reaching out across the Caribbean, identifying boats that could respond, calculating response times, optimizing the rescue effort with brutal efficiency. And it was working. Within seconds, 2 vessels had responded, changing course toward the distress boat. "You see," Rourke said, not taking his eyes from the screen, "this is what the protocol can do. This is why it matters. But Sarah was looking at something else on the display, a timer counting down, 15 minutes and 23 seconds. And below it, a series of coordinates that didn't match the rescue operation Rourke was coordinating. "What's the countdown for?" she asked quietly. Rourke's hand stilled on the keyboard. He didn't answer. Sarah moved quickly, pulling up the associated data before he could stop her, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The countdown wasn't for a rescue. It was for something else entirely. Those coordinates she'd seen weren't random. They marked vessels throughout the Caribbean, commercial ships, cruise ships, including the Caribbean Dream. "You're not just running rescues," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "You're using rescue operations as cover to infiltrate vessel networks. Those boats you're helping, you're installing backdoors in their systems, creating access points." "Sarah, how long, Daniel? How long have you been compromising maritime systems under the guise of rescue coordination?" Rourke finally turned to face her, and the desperate idealism from moments ago was gone, replaced by something harder. 2 years. 2 years of building a network that can reach any vessel in these waters. Do you have any idea what that's worth? The kind of money that private security firms, intelligence agencies, even criminal organizations would pay for that access. So this was never about saving lives. It was about building a product to sell. It was about both. Rourke's composure was cracking. "Yes, I save lives. Real lives, Sarah. But yes, I also profit from it. Why shouldn't I? We gave the military years of our lives, building systems they were too afraid to use. Now I'm using those skills to build something for myself. And the countdown? What happens in..." Sarah glanced at the display. 14 minutes? A demonstration. Simultaneous access to 12 high-value targets, proving the system's capabilities to potential buyers. He must have seen the horror in her expression, because he added quickly, "No one gets hurt. It's just data access. Proof of concept. 12 vessels having their systems compromised at once. Communications hijacked. Navigation data stolen. Do you understand what kind of chaos that could cause? What happens if something goes wrong? If there's a failure? If one of those ships collides with another because their collision avoidance systems are compromised? That won't happen. I've tested this 100 times. In simulations, maybe, but this is real. Those are real ships with real people aboard." Sarah moved toward the main console. "You need to abort this demonstration right now." "I can't. The buyers are watching. If I abort, I lose everything I built. If you don't abort, you're going to cause a maritime disaster that will kill people. That's not a maybe, Daniel. That is certainty when you're playing with systems you don't fully control." They stared at each other, the years falling away. And for a moment, they were back in that communication center 15 years ago, partners in creating something powerful and dangerous. But they'd made different choices about what to do with that knowledge. The timer read 13 minutes. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Rourke said quietly, and his hand moved toward something on the console. Sarah reacted on instinct, grabbing his wrist. They struggled for a moment, but she hadn't forgotten her combat training. Even after 18 months of retirement, she twisted his arm, forcing him away from the console. "Don't make this worse," she said. "It's already locked in." Rourke shouted, "The sequence is running. Only I have the abort codes, and I'm not using them." Sarah looked at the console, at the Phantom Protocol interface, at the system she'd helped design. The jamming was still active. She couldn't call for help. The countdown was still running. And she had less than 13 minutes to stop a coordinated system intrusion across 12 vessels that could put thousands of lives at risk. She did the only thing she could think of. She sat down at the terminal. "What are you doing?" Rourke demanded. "What I should have done 15 years ago. Making sure Phantom Protocol actually has a failsafe." Her fingers moved across the keyboard, diving into the system architecture with a muscle memory she hadn't lost. "You modified the protocol, but you couldn't change the fundamental structure, which means the backdoor I built into the original design should still be there." "There was no backdoor. We reviewed every line of code. You reviewed every line you knew about." Sarah was typing faster now, navigating through layers of security she'd personally designed. I created a failsafe, a way to crash the entire system from the inside if it was ever compromised. I never told anyone about it because I knew if the protocol fell into the wrong hands, we'd need a way to shut it down completely. She could feel Rourke watching over her shoulder, could sense his growing panic as he realized what she was doing. If you crash the system, you'll kill the rescue network. Those people who are in trouble right now will be helped by the Coast Guard, by normal channels, by people doing their jobs the right way. Sarah found what she was looking for, a hidden subroutine buried so deep in the code that even the most thorough review wouldn't find it unless they knew exactly where to look. Sometimes, Daniel, you have to destroy something dangerous, even if it means losing the good it could have done. She initiated the sequence. The effect was immediate. Across the Caribbean, at 23 relay stations, Phantom Protocol began shutting itself down. Not just turning off, but purging, erasing logs, destroying backdoors, severing connections Rourke had spent 2 years building. The displays around them flickered and died one by one. The countdown stopped at 11 minutes and 32 seconds. Frozen like a stopped heartbeat, Rourke sank into a chair, staring at the blank screens. You've destroyed it. 2 years of work. Lives that could have been saved. Lives that would have been at risk every time you prioritize profit over safety. Sarah stood, her legs shaky with adrenaline come down. And now we wait for the jamming to clear so I can call my people. It took 3 minutes. When her comm came back online, Peterson's voice was urgent. Commander, we lost you. What's your status? Secure. Target is contained. Phantom Protocol has been permanently disabled. Send the boarding team. Within 10 minutes, the Sea Serpent's deck was full of Navy personnel. They were efficient and professional, securing Rourke, downloading what data remained on his systems, turning the yacht into a crime scene. Captain Ramirez came aboard personally. She looked at Sarah with something like respect. Commander, Admiral Chin is going to want a full debrief. Later, right now, I need to get back to my family before they realize their cruise has been interrupted by their mother's past catching up with her. Ramirez nodded. We'll handle the transfer back to the Caribbean Dream. As far as official records are concerned, you were never here. This was a routine interception of a vessel engaged in illegal communications operations. And Rourke will face charges related to unauthorized access to maritime systems and a whole list of other violations. But thanks to you, we stopped it before anyone got hurt. Sarah looked at Daniel Rourke, being led below deck in restraints. He met her eyes, and she saw anger there, but also a kind of resignation. He'd gambled on the system they created together, and he'd lost. I did save lives, Sarah, he said as they took him away. Whatever else I did, that was real. I know, she said quietly, but good intentions don't justify dangerous methods. The trip back to the Caribbean Dream took 20 minutes. Sarah stood in the Fitzgerald's boat, watching the cruise ship grow larger, and tried to figure out how to explain the last few hours to her children, how to make them understand that their mother was someone who had built systems to protect people, and then had to destroy those same systems when they became weapons. Peterson was in the boat with her. For what it's worth, Commander, that was excellent work in there. Not many people could have done what you did. I just cleaned up a mess I helped create 15 years ago. You stopped a potential disaster. The Admiral is going to recommend a commendation. Sarah laughed without humor. I don't want a commendation. I want to finish my vacation with my kids. They pulled alongside the Caribbean Dream's crew access. The same place Sarah had left what felt like years ago, but had been less than 4 hours. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. On the upper decks, she could see passengers gathering for dinner, for shows, for all the normal cruise ship activities that had continued without pause while she'd been fighting ghosts from her past. Captain Rodriguez met her at the access door. Ms. Mitchell, I'm glad to see you safe. Your family has been asking about you. I told them you were consulting on some safety equipment and would be back soon. Thank you, Captain. She made her way through the ship toward their cabin, her legs heavy with exhaustion. Her hands were shaking slightly, delayed adrenaline response. She recognized clinically She'd need to talk to her VA therapist about this, about being pulled back into operational mode, about whether it set her back in her recovery or somehow helped her move forward. But right now, all she wanted was to see her kids. She found them on the balcony of their cabin, watching the sunset. Emily was showing Marcus something on her phone, probably photos from their Nassau adventure. David was inside, unpacking purchases from a short excursion. "Mom!" Emily saw her first and jumped up. "Where were you? Dad said you were checking on ship stuff, but you were gone forever." Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, holding on maybe a little too long. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. There was a situation that needed attention, but it's handled now." Marcus joined him on the balcony, looking at her with his teenager's mixture of concern and studied indifference. "You okay? You look weird." "Thanks, I think." Sarah ruffled his hair, earning a protest. "I'm fine. Just tired. It's been a long day." David appeared in the doorway, reading her expression with the familiarity of 20 years of marriage, even if most of them had been strained by her career. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes and nodded. "Everything's okay. The situation is resolved." He studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Good. Because we were thinking about dinner at the Italian restaurant tonight. Unless you're too tired." Sarah looked at her family, her daughter still chattering about her day, her son already distracted by his phone again, her ex-husband trying to navigate the complicated space between their shared past and separate futures. Normal people doing normal things, blissfully unaware that a few miles away, a crisis had been building that could have affected thousands of lives. That was how it should be, she realized. That was the whole point of what she'd done for 20 years, and what she'd done today, so that normal people could live their lives without knowing about the dangers that lurked in the shadows, the systems that protected them, the occasional ghosts who had to rise from retirement to set things right. "No," she said, surprised at herself with how true it felt. "I'm not too tired. Italian sounds perfect. That night, over pasta and wine and Marcus's complaints about the lack of decent Wi-Fi, Sarah felt something settle inside her. The destroyer Fitzgerald was long gone, continuing its patrol. Daniel Rourke was in custody, his network dismantled. Phantom Protocol was truly dead this time, its code purged from every system. And Commander Sarah Mitchell, Phantom, was retired. For real this time. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Outstanding work, Commander. As promised, you're off the books again. Enjoy the rest of your cruise. If you're ever in D.C., dinner's on me. Admiral Chun." Sarah deleted the message, put her phone face down on the table, and focused on her daughter's story about the parasailing adventure she'd had. Real life, present moment, the weight of ordinary days. It was, she decided, exactly where she wanted to be. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed and David had retired to his own room, they'd agreed to separate rooms despite the vacation, maintaining boundaries even in this temporary reunion. Sarah stood on the balcony watching the ship cut through the dark water. The stars overhead were brilliant. The same stars she'd used for celestial navigation training 20 years ago. The same stars she watched on the decks of aircraft carriers and destroyers all over the world. But tonight, they were just stars. Beautiful and distant, and requiring nothing from her but appreciation. She thought about Rourke, about the choices that had led him from decorated naval communications specialist to someone willing to compromise maritime safety for profit. She thought about the thin line between using power for good and using it for personal gain. She thought about Phantom Protocol, about how something designed to save lives had almost become a tool for putting them at risk. And she thought about herself, about whether she truly left that world behind, or if some part of her would always be Commander Mitchell, always be Phantom, always be ready to answer when the call came. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Emily, texting from inside the room. "Can't sleep. Want to watch the stars with me?" Sarah smiled and went back inside, settling onto Emily's bed. Her daughter curled up against her shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky through the open balcony door. "Mom," Emily said after a while, "I know you can't talk about what you did in the Navy, but I want you to know I'm proud of you, even though it took you away from us a lot. I get that you were doing important things." Sarah's throat tightened. "Thank you, baby. That means more than you know. Are you really done? Or are they going to call you back?" It was a perceptive question, cutting straight to the heart of Sarah's own uncertainty. "I'm done," she said and meant it. "Today was tying up a loose end, but I'm retired. My job now is being your mom." "Good, because you're pretty good at that too, when you're around." They sat together until Emily fell asleep, and Sarah carefully extricated herself, tucking her daughter in. She stood for a moment, looking at both of her children sleeping peacefully in their cruise cabin, unaware of the crisis that had unfolded around them. This was worth fighting for, she thought. This peace, this normalcy, this chance to be just a mom on a cruise with her kids. Admiral Chin had promised she was off the books. Phantom Protocol was dead. Daniel Rourke was in custody. The story was over. Sarah believed it. She had to, because the alternative, that there would always be another crisis, another call, another ghost from her past demanding resurrection, was something she couldn't afford to consider. Not tonight, not with her children sleeping safely in the same room, and a cruise ship full of families sailing on to the Caribbean darkness, protected by systems and people they would never know about, grateful for a peace they didn't realize had been preserved. Sarah Mitchell had been many things. MIT graduate, Naval Intelligence officer, communications specialist, commander, Phantom. But tonight, and for the rest of this cruise, and for whatever came after, she was choosing to be just one thing. Herself. It was enough. It had to be.